reform and reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I wish we'll come back a little bit to what you said. But one key point to me at this moment is I wish the Eurosceptics here would hear more about the facts that you just mentioned, that the reforms are already yielding benefits in terms of the economy in Serbia, which is very important. Ambassador Bakota, please.
So many thanks for nice remarking words, and I'm glad to participate on this very important conference, particularly bearing in mind that we are standing, my country, Croatia, as Sam rightly mentioned before, running the presidency next year in the first half. And from my point of view, from our point of view, it's going to have a very special importance for the region and for Serbia as well. So basically we are the first country from the region in a way who is running the presidency, the neighboring country to Serbia, the youngest member of the European Union with the freshest memories from the accession process. And as Sam rightly mentioned, we put enlargement and EU perspective of the Western Balkans very high on our agenda. It is going to be one of our priorities. We will run EU Western Balkans Summit 20 years after Zagreb Summit, which was a very strong impetus for the EU perspective for the countries in the region. We do believe that the concept has to be founded and based on strong Europe for all of us. We do believe, and this government of my country is very much in favor of very strong EU messages for the Western Balkans and for the whole region. It is not going to be easy. There is new cycle of legislation and the new commission. So Croatia is definitely very much in favor to motivate, to boost partners in the European Union to be in favorem of enlargement. So it's more than EU perspective. We want to put an emphasis on enlargement. This is very important to be mentioned. Secondly, I think the basic principles and our goals during our presidency will be following principles. Europe that grows and develops, so in a way sustainable economical growth. Then, of course, raising convergence. Convergence is definitely very important. Strengthening competitiveness, this is also very important. Very much based and hooked up with connectivity. So all of those issues are very much linked to the Berlin process. I think it's very important to maintain and to reach the synergy when it comes to the different regional cooperation processes and what is absolutely ongoing for the time being in the Western Balkans. We should not forget that Europe, the fourth principle of Croatian presidency will be Europe that protects its citizens. We are facing all of the countries in the region, Serbia, Croatia, definitely huge challenges when it comes to the migration issue, security, and we will definitely put this very high on our agenda. It's very much linked to the stability, and security has to do a lot of things in common with economical prosperity. And as I rightly at the very, very beginning mentioned, of course, Europe that is open and assertive in its immediate neighborhood and globally. I think that Croatian experience is that the European Union and the negotiation process has a very strong message when it comes to transformation of the country. So the reforms are not only agenda for Brussels. I think all of the countries who negotiated with the EU finally, eventually got a very strong administrative capacities, better administrative capacities, and of course, better economy. So those are our plans for the presidency, and Croatia will definitely put very high on our agenda European perspective. So summit is a fantastic opportunity. Bulgarians, they ran summit 2 years ago. And after 2 years, there is a chance to have very high on the agenda with all of the European leaders, European perspective for the Western Balkan countries. Croatia is very much in favor. of seeing neighboring countries, all of the Western Balkan countries on the way to the EU. We are very much advocating the opening of the negotiation process with Northern Macedonia and with Albania. This could not be decoupled from security in the region, and security is extremely important. Sam mentioned, of course, strict and fair principle. This is going to be our guideline, and we will be offering to the Serbian side as well strong messages and support when it comes to the local reforms by offering and providing to the Serbian authorities our support when it comes to our experience and our way. It is already ongoing. There are a lot of twinning projects between Croatia and Serbia, a lot of cross-border processes of cooperation, which is quite important that neighboring countries are cooperating together and offering mutual support to each other. The process needs to be strict and fair, of course. And this is a very important regatta principle. We do see all of the countries from the Western Balkans on the way to the EU as an indispensable way, but it has to be done on their own merit. This is quite important because, as I already mentioned, transformation of the countries throughout the process are very important, and it will be yielded eventually with better results in economy. We are definitely supporting and congratulating to the Serbian friends recent economical success. This is going to be a very good example for the rest of the region and for bilateral cooperation between our two countries. So I'll stop here, and maybe later on we can continue with some other remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much. This summit initiative is certainly going to be very interesting and also very, very helpful. Ambassador Lahdevirta, you're right now, your country's in the sort of a hot seat. You have the new administration coming in. You have a lot of, European Union has a lot of experience with those changes, but it always is not an easy thing. And you also have the Brexit thing happening on your watch. Please.
Well, thank you very much for the sympathy, but it's not really that bad. This is our third EU presidency, and it seems that there are always difficult issues that the presidencies have to tackle with the help of member states and EU institutions. And of course, New Year is coming, and then we will pass the baton to Croatia, so that's always a happy occasion, of course. But of course, on the other hand, our presidency does happen at a rather special time for the Union, and firstly, the newly elected European Parliament and Commission have just started their term or starting their term, and in addition, the European leaders have agreed on an ambitious strategic agenda for the years 2019 to 2024 to take the EU forwards and to address its internal and external challenges. We are the first presidents to integrate the new priorities into the Council's work, and therefore they are also reflected in our presidency program. And then, of course, there's Brexit, which really is a burden, especially on Brussels administration, but also to member states. But I think what is crucial is to minimize its negative implications to both parties. And this is acknowledged also in our presidency program, which says our aim is to defend the EU's unity and interest. Brexit should not dominate the EU agenda at the expense of other major items. And I might just add that EU enlargement is really one of those other major items. We are an enlargement-friendly country, as the benefits are clear to us. In our view, enlargement plays a significant role in advancing peace, prosperity and security on our continent. And therefore, as stated also in our presidency program, we are committed to taking forward work on a credible enlargement perspective for the Western Balkans. And on this autumn, I think the biggest single issue is the decision to start membership negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. And we are really working actively with member states and EU institutions to reach a positive decision by the end of this month. This is something we see crucial not only for the countries in question, but also for the whole Western Balkans region and to the EU itself. We also consistently emphasize the need to fulfill the membership criteria. And as we are really talking about very challenging reforms, accession process cannot be just a box-ticking exercise. The Copenhagen criteria are fundamental and something that is set, not some accession dates. No matter how beneficial effects those dates could have on Western Balkans countries' motivation to fulfill the criteria. And actually, I very much agree with Prime Minister Brnabić when she stated that the journey is as important as the destination. And she mentioned that Serbia would continue to pursue accession in order to tackle corruption, strengthening public institutions and open its markets, even if the enlargement took 10 years or so. And hopefully the journey doesn't take that long anymore. But of course, a lot depends on how fast Serbia can do the reforms. But to end my remarks here at the beginning, I just want to point out a couple of things more in our presidency program, which was published in June, as they are some of the key issues that dominate the EU agenda presently, and they are also some of the issues of this conference. And first, sustainability. Our slogan is Sustainable Europe, Sustainable Future. And for the sake of ourselves and especially our offspring, we really need to tackle the challenges related to environment and climate change before it's too late. And we have to do it together. Second, common values and the rule of law are really cornerstones of EU action. And this relates also to the ongoing discussion on, for example, multi-annual financial framework within the EU. And finally, competitiveness and social inclusiveness. Obviously, Europe and European companies have to be competitive globally in order to survive. But it cannot be done at the expense of ordinary people. I think it's very interesting that in August, the US Business Roundtable recommended that companies should take into consideration also other issues than just profits. And then in September, the Financial Times and economist Thomas Piketty urged that capitalism has to be fixed if we are to avoid an even more drastic concentration of wealth than is the case presently, and a return of similar situation in our societies as we had in the 19th century. So I believe the EU has an important role to play also in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Ambassador Fabrizi was there when I had our conference, when I said if the membership in the European Union is the Holy Grail, then I think the quest for the Holy Grail is even more important than the Grail itself, because the reforms are so necessary. And yes, if you have a higher goal like the membership in the EU, they are a little bit easier to implement, despite all the difficulties. Professor.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to, I'll try and give the broader backdrop in terms of what is the environment within which European politics operate towards enlargement, and what are the domestic politics that shape this environment together with the external challenges. And I might sound a little bit more blunt than the previous speakers. I have the advantage of not representing a government or any other intergovernmental organization, and this affords me this privilege, which I intend to abuse. Now, the European Union, as it has emerged after the European elections, is faced both with domestic challenges and external challenges. Starting from external challenges, it is seeking to protect and to safeguard the multilateral global order, which is under threat. Free trade is a broader environment within which the European Union has been built and flourished. International treaties, the international rule of law, multilateral institutions such as WTO, all these are institutions that the European Union feels committed to protecting, and probably for the first time within decades maybe, it feels pressured to defend. The second thing is that it is most formidably facing its own domestic challenges. And if I were to summarize the domestic challenges, I would say that they very much pertain to the reemergence of national democratic politics. In other words, a lot of European integration, both in terms of deepening and in terms of enlargement, was led by elites that presumed a kind of consensus by the national electorates to move ahead. And now we know that this tacit consensus is no more to be taken for granted. We have known that probably since the 90s, but we have learned it more vigorously with the reemergence of populism and nationalism at a national level, and in a way Brexit is an expression of that. And we've also seen, in a way, the hollowing out of the core of the European Union vis-à-vis the forces of intense intergovernmentalism. And to put it more specifically, deepening as well as enlargement was led by a core of countries that were committed to this project. Germany was central among them. The UK was also a country that was committed to enlargement. And what we have seen after the European elections, but even before that, is a changing of political balances within the EU. Germany is facing its own domestic political challenges in terms of challenges to the governing coalition, but also in terms of challenges to its own economy. The European Union is faced with the challenges of a probable economic downturn ahead of it, which kind of tends to concentrate the mind towards domestic priorities. And therefore, the main coalition, if I would put it so, of enlargement supporters of the past is now significantly weakened. Germany has domestic challenges to take into account, and the UK is on its way out. On the other hand, France, the French government under Macron has re-emerged strengthened after the European elections. France has an important EU ambition. Now it is more, I would say, rigorous compared to that of Germany with regard to the European Union. And this ambition is what is often called, and it's also reflected by the European institutions, a sovereign Europe, Europe as a global actor, and of course a Europe which is able to protect domestically, Europe qui protège. And the reason I'm mentioning all that is because they do affect the debate on enlargement, because they do tend to prioritize deepening, putting our house to order versus widening up. And we see a group of countries, or we see several countries emerging that are more skeptical or even openly skeptical vis-à-vis enlargement. Last summer, the accession talks vis-à-vis Northern Macedonia and Albania were blocked by France and the Netherlands. And this revisionism of enlargement is a very important new element for the European Union, new over the last decade, not over the last few weeks. But compared to the appetite for enlargement that we had seen in the 90s or even the 2000s,